I don't know. You get the speaking slot at the last of the second day. I guess I'm between us, the book signing, and then the party out at on the island, right? So this speech actually has gotten delayed 1 year. I was supposed to deliver the keynote last year. Unfortunately, I had a little personal medical incident come up, so I was not able to attend, and I had Phil Robb fill in for me last year. So this is a long overdue, 1 year delayed talk. And what I was asked to talk about really is talking about the role of innovation. When I was at HP as a CTO there, I had the open source group reporting to me. So if you know Bedell and Phil and that whole team, they reported into my organization. I oversaw all of the open source in addition to a bunch of other roles. In addition, overseeing the innovation piece, you see this interesting convergence between the innovation that's enabled in these, what I call collaborative economies. But you have to understand a little bit of the perspective of organizations like HP or other organizations, how we think about innovation. Now, as you'll see up here, you'll see my new title. I just recently took over as president and CEO at Cable Labs as of June 1st. So I have totally failed at this concept of retirement. I at least had 6 months to play with my granddaughter. But Cable Labs, if you're not familiar with it, is it's the nonprofit R&D and innovation lab for the cable industry worldwide, headquartered in Boulder, Colorado. We also have offices in the Valley. If you're familiar with if you have a cable modem running DOCSIS 3 actually, that provides your broadband performance into your home, DOCSIS was invented at Cable Labs. So I recently just took over there as the president and CEO. And believe me, I'm going to share with you a little bit of perspective on the challenges of these kinds of collaborations from an industry perspective. I now have the job of proverbially herding cats, and if I thought it was tough enough at HP. But one of the things we think about from the standpoint of innovation is there's two fundamental challenges in innovation. Doesn't matter whether you're a small startup or you're a 100,000 employee multinational. Two things: innovation gap, innovation delay. The innovation gap is the lack of good quality ideas. Right? People might think, oh, people just have more ideas than to work with. Yeah, you get lots of ideas. In my innovation team, when I was at HP, we would roughly go through about 3,500 or 4,000 ideas every year coming in to the innovation team. And this was a pan-HP team. Of that 3,500, we would fund roughly about 30. And even of those 30, I would say maybe half, what I would call, would be really breakthrough ideas. Everybody suffers from this innovation gap. Why? Because most people view it, their source area for those ideas is inside their organization. It's limited by the ideas that are submitted within their teams. Secondarily, the innovation delay. Once you have a good idea and you say go, how long does it take you to go from saying, yes, we're going to go and we're going to execute this idea, until it's out there and it's actually being used and it's having impact? How fast can you make that happen? In the case of PCs, it's about an 18 to 24 month process from the time someone says go through all the manufacturing and get it onto the shelf. For printers, this may be a little surprising to you, it's 7 years from start to finish to put a new printer on the shelf. How do you address the innovation gap and the innovation delay? Well, part of the challenge is this issue of what do you do versus what others do on your behalf. The fact is that the innovation rates are accelerating. The speed of innovation. Look, I guess I'm still bleed blue, even though I've been out of HP now, 8 months going on 9 months. So I can't actually, emit the A word. I instead refer to them as the fruit company. The fruit company actually drives a phenomenal acceleration rate. right, from the standpoint of their new products, and they've disrupted the industry. Even they, though, are running into a little bit of a challenge because what's happened in most recently with regards to the expectation of the new phone. Last quarter, everybody stopped buying phones from them because the consumer had an expectation that the new phone should have already been out. So it isn't just about what we do as technologists in driving an innovation rate. Customers and users of our technology have an ever-increasing pace of what they're going to expect as those next innovations that are going to become available. And so the challenge we've got is how do we keep up this pace? It's constantly accelerating. It's not a thing where you get to a steady state and you just move forward. It is constantly going forward. And the reality is that you can no longer do the level of innovation that you need to do by yourself. And there's really this range of collaboration that's happening. You know, a lot of organizations, particularly big companies, think that they can do the innovation rate by themselves. They can do their own innovation self-contained. Go back to 7 years for printers. That's fully vertically integrated, including the semiconductor fabs. Designing the inks, designing all of the elements that need to go into a truly new next generation version of those kinds of technologies. When I was CTO at HP, just to kind of give you a size and scale of the resources, 46,000 engineers. That's no managers and no supervisors. That's individual contributing engineers. 450 PhD researchers and labs and $10 to $12 billion of cash. Lots of resources. But an IBM, an HP, even the companies of those size that have those kinds of resources have come to the realization over the last 5 to 10 years that they cannot do it all themselves. So what do? You drive and you start bringing people together. You start driving the industries together. We heard in this morning's talking about the invention of the USB standard. It was 7 companies in the industry coming together to drive that. You never would have ever had that happen. In my role at HP, I would actually do work with the CTO at Dell and the CTO at Acer to drive standards around the industry. But even then, you only get a certain amount of leverage. Rather than a company being a unit of one trying to drive innovation, to now industries trying to come together, so you can get tens of people together and think about how do you change the innovation rate, to now really this push and what we've seen with Linux and other programs around, can you get hundreds, can you get thousands to contribute? And because of bringing that mind share together, can you accelerate those, the changes that are happening? Can you drive standards that allow for the industry to actually move much quicker? In the case of my current role at Cable Labs is, as I said, is funded by the cable industry. So there are actually 34 cable operators around the world that have come together that fund the R&D. They're the big guys. The challenge, though, when you get, whether it's 10 people in an industry, 30 cable operators, thousands of developers, the hard part is to get to agreement, right? It's a consensus, right? How do you address this challenge? Innovation is about speed. Consensus is about being slow, right? How do I get and move forward? You know, in the video clip in this morning's session, there was this question about who makes the final decision of what goes into Linux kernel, right? We refer to it as the benevolent dictatorship approach. You know, everybody in this room is pretty clear as to who makes the call. And what we have found in driving these kinds of agreements is that there has to be someone who is the lead, who has that vision, who has that voice. But more importantly, they have the trust and the transparency of everybody else that's involved in the effort. When you look at the success of certain open source programs, the leaders have been those that have been able to garner up the support, right? We've all experienced this. What we're seeing now is a fundamental change in how people are looking at the open source community and figuring out, how do I apply it to my own innovation approaches? How do I change? How do I use a collaborative approach? I don't need to do a whole open source program. Can I do a collaboration around a smaller set of efforts, around those things that can actually have success? So one of the new approaches that I'm advocating, and I've used this in a number of programs and had huge success with it, is this concept of what I call co-innovation. Now, to get there, it's an evolution, and co-innovation is different. And I want to explain this just to give you a little bit of the background on this. Let's face it, we all do these opportunistic projects, right? I got a problem, I go in and fix it, I'm done, I'm off to the next problem, right? Not a lot of thinking behind it, just go solve the problem. Then there's these project-based collaborations. Get a couple of people together, figure out that there's a bigger problem. How do you think about it from a strategic perspective? And then it's what I would call these true co-innovation. A lot of people want to jump in. They have a piece of software. I mean, I've seen this in my new job and talking with others. Everybody thinks, oh, we wrote this piece of code, right? It's interesting. Ooh, let's just open source it. Let's throw it out there. Let's see what happens. I mean, we saw the list of how many people really do, how many active projects are really out there in the open source community, how many contributions really occur, when's the last time a contribution was made, right? It isn't just about putting it out there, it's about building the trust in the community around those things. The same happens inside of organizations. At HP, we had about 35 co-innovation projects underway with a variety of different partners. And it wasn't around open source. These are, think about them as an open source kind of model, but to go solve very specific problems. The one I want to share with you is a co-innovation project that we started in HP, and the HP has now allowed me to take out, called Hacking Autism. So, if you're not familiar with autism, right? Impacts growing number of kids, 1 out of every 90. If you live in Silicon Valley, actually Silicon Valley has the highest penetration of kids with autism. We actually created a co-innovation project through trust. We did a couple of test projects. We solved some problems with some parents who had contacted us about their kids with autism, and we gradually grew this from a opportunistic project to truly a project-based to a co-innovation where we brought together about 20 of the leading tech companies around the world to partner with us to create new kinds of technologies aimed specifically at kids with autism. So there are some characteristics over all my years of experience about how this works and why it works. How do you go from an opportunistic, solve a quick problem to really transforming it into something totally radically new? So what are those characteristics? One is culture. We tend to underestimate how important culture is inside of any organization, right? How strong that culture is. Does the culture have a basis for doing these kinds of things? It's a great example of looking at the culture of organizations to see whether or not they truly support open source, right? In this case, how do you bring multiple people together that come from a variety of different organizations but coalesce around a very specific set of cultures? Cultures of transparency, honesty, not game playing, not passive aggressive, truly supportive of the idea, not credit. Who did the work, who didn't do the work. Culture plays an absolute critical role, whether it's this kind of innovation or any kind of an innovation. It's the hardest trait I had at HP was getting people to let go of the idea, right? We'd go in, we'd pitch an idea to the board or to the senior execs at HP. A month later, what happens? Some EVP is standing up giving a speech, taking credit for the idea. What happens to the employee? They go nuts. It's my idea. I should be getting credit for it. No. It's not about the ownership of the idea. It's about letting go. And you have to have a culture that not only encourages people to do that, but also does go back and reward them and recognize them for the effort that's truly there. The project. Not all projects are a fit, right? In the case of an innovation pipeline, if you don't have a kill rate of 90%, you're not trying hard enough, meaning 90% of all the projects you start end up on the cutting room floor. If you have a 10% failure rate, you're chicken. You don't want to take the risk. You need to have a kill rate, a death rate of your projects high enough. At the same time, the definition of those projects is absolutely critical, how you define those projects. I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a second. Leadership. No doubt who has the leadership role in our community here. Whatever program, even inside of organizations or bringing multiple players together, there has to be this anointed, benevolent dictator. Somebody who makes the call and everybody rallies behind that call. Taking a vote on every decision is the quickest way to go from a 6-month project to a 60-year project and everything in between. Criteria. What constitutes success? Right? Inside of large organizations, people think it's money. Yeah, in some cases, it's not. In the case of hacking autism, it's not about money. In fact, the companies that are involved in the hacking autism program won't see really any return, but it's about having impact on those kids' lives. I mean, I've seen one situation where we developed some touch technologies in response to a very specific young adult and their parents. This kid was nonverbal, had no verbal communications with their parents up until they were 15, 16. We enabled some touch technologies for them, worked with them, tried them out, and as a result, we were there with this young man, and he was interacting touch with this piece of technology, and for the very first time, he told his mom he loved her. 16 years never having any kind of communication. Every engineer in the room was crying. That's a criteria that works outside the bounds of what we normally think about. And so in this case, understanding the criteria, in this case, having impact on these kids' lives, is absolutely critical. And the investment, how much time do you put in? Who's putting the time in? Right? And so, is it money? No. Is it time? Yes. Are we passionate? Are we seeing about these kinds of changes? These, after all my years, when you break out, when you look at open source projects that have been successful and ones that have failed, when I look at innovation programs inside of organizations like HP and Pitney Bowes and Kroger and American Express, all organizations trying to be more innovative, it doesn't matter whether it's an open source program or whether it's an internal program trying to transform your organization. If you don't understand these criteria, if you just go in thinking it's about the end result and you don't understand the culture, the odds of that project being successful swings to zero very, very quickly. So what is it about co-innovation? The one thing, after all these years, that I have found on the co-innovation that is the biggest key factor to success or failure. And this is the same whether it's an open source project or an internal innovation program. Number one, and that is this level of codependency. Meaning there's some catalyst amongst the players who are involved that makes them mutually dependent on each other. If I'm with a major corporation and I have a small company come to me with an innovation and they want me to put it into a product and then put it into my supply chain, small company, that's their objective. But the problem is there's no dependency. I can pick vendor A, vendor B, vendor C. That's not co-innovation. That's more of a buyer-seller relationship. Codependency is when you both are keenly interested in solving a particular problem, and the only way to solve that problem is both of you coming together. Neither one of you can do it by yourself, and there's no other option as far as the players out there to go solve the problem. As I mentioned before, in my previous job, we had a fairly good, robust number of co-innovation projects, and even in those, I would break them down to 3 or 4 that really met this criteria of dependency. Nobody can do it alone. A unique set of people with common interests and this mutual dependency, meaning the ultimate objective is only met by both of them working together. And of those programs, what I have found is the speed of that innovation is 2 to 3 times faster than doing it by yourself. Huge, huge, huge impact. And one of the pieces that I've been out talking about and sharing is understanding back to the 5 criteria that are absolutely critical to drive the success in the innovation. We've shifted. We've gone from an economy where the biggest wins and the biggest always have the resources to be successful to a recognition that nobody, no matter what your size, no matter what resources you have available, will you be successful by yourself. The open source community was the first to see this. The success that we've been able to achieve with the efforts underway has been nothing less than astounding. But now we can apply it to other things. It's not just about, open innovation, which is kind of a buzzword that's out there where you bring in innovations from the outside. But how do we need to change corporate culture? Senior executives who basically blow up what an organization structure looks like and rethinks how you do innovation inside of your organization. But the most important piece is its success through dependency. Nobody is an island. Nobody has the unlimited resources. So with that, I'm going to wrap up here. Some information if you want to follow up. As was mentioned before, the book, which came out in February, is called Beyond the Obvious. The book is really based on this concept of not so much the co-innovation work, that's actually some of my more recent work. The book is based on this concept that innovation's a skill that you can learn, you can practice, and you can become proficient at. The problem is nobody teaches anybody how to do that. Now, it's a little different in this community because we're all innovative in our own ways. But the premise of the book is that there is a way for everybody to unlock your own personal ability to be more creative, whether that's in the tech field, social services. One case study in the book is the work I'm doing with the U.S. Department of Education on how do you innovate the U.S. education. Well, that's a project I probably should not have taken on. Nothing like trying to have the administration fix the K-12 education problem, but that's part of what's also in the book. So, again, there are, I don't know, some number of copies they've got, so it'll be kind of on first come, first served basis. The books will be given away for free, and I'll be available to sign them. Thank you very much.